on this topic of onboarding, and specifically how to onboard your new hires. Throughout this hour, I will walk you through some of the best practices around how to onboard your new hires, whether that's in person or virtually. I know many of us on this call today, many of you in your organizations across different industries are navigating COVID-19. And so with that, many of you are shifting a lot of your practices into this virtual space that we all find ourselves in. And so today, over the next hour, I will give you many best practices that I hope you'll be able to take away from this session and begin to apply in your organization. So without further ado, let's get started. So I'm Sofia Arisheh, and I'm the owner of Upskill Consulting. I am the HR consultant there, and we are a human resources consulting firm located here in Langley. And I've had the privilege of being able to work across many different industries. And this is during my time as an HR manager, and then during my time in consulting as well. And you see all of them listed up here on the screen. And the beauty is that many of you on this call today also come from a very diverse, set of industries as well. We have some from banking, accounting, legal, engineering, training, sales, service, not-for-profits, to just mention a few. And what I find true across the board with all of these different industries, regardless of the size of your company, is that onboarding is an incredibly important aspect of what we do as a business. It is the beginning of an employee life cycle. It is that first impression with that new hire. And quite frankly, making sure that we have a successful onboarding program is going to impact your brand, and it's going to impact your retention of your talent as well. And we all want that, right? I mean, when we think about all of the time and the money that we spend on recruiting, sifting through all of the applications, the interview process, the actual hiring, the training, and so forth, all of that is incredibly costly for all of us as organizations. And so getting it right at the onset of their employee life cycle is so important. It's absolutely pivotal. And so today, over the next hour, again, I'll be walking you through many different samples, and I'll be providing you with this PowerPoint deck as well. After today's training, you'll receive an email from me with this PowerPoint deck. There are 3 learning objectives for today's session. The first one is recognize the benefits of onboarding. And so here I'll walk you through why should we even bother with the onboarding process. The second piece is I'll walk you through the different stages of onboarding. And I can tell you from my experience working with clients, one of the things I repeatedly hear is, well, onboarding for us is making sure that their first day is a good one. And I'll walk you through actually the different stages of onboarding, which far expands just the first day. And lastly, I'll walk you through, and probably most importantly, I'll walk you through a lot of the tidbits, best practices of how to successfully onboard your new hires. And again, I'll give you examples of in-person and virtual too. So let's start off with the first piece, which is why is onboarding so important? Right up here on the screen, you have the definition of what onboarding is. And I like to define it as it's the process of really integrating a new employee. And when I say integrating, what I mean here is that you've hired talent, right? They've walked into your doors, and now your job is to make sure that they understand your company, they understand the culture within your company, they understand their role, the expectations of them. And ultimately, we want to be able to set them up for success. And that is what onboarding is all about. So because of that, it goes beyond that first day of when they start their job. Now, what I wanted to do, I thought this would be really interesting. I really wanted to hear from all of you on the call today in terms of where you're at with your onboarding, so that I can kind of assess and then give you some specific examples as we go through the next hour together. So let me pull up the first poll. So let me bring this over to the screen so you can see it. Okay, so I'm hoping you can see this on the screen. Do you have a structured onboarding process in your company? Yes or no? Thank you, Nate, for the compliment too. Thank you. Perfect. All right, so we have everyone that's voted. So let me share my screen. Hi, Nate. Let me share my screen with you right now. So here you go. Here are the results. Does everyone see the results on the screen?
Nope.
No?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, excellent. Perfect. So do you have a structured onboarding process in your company? 75% of you say yes, 25% of you say no. Perfect. Let me do the next poll and then we'll chat about this. So here is the next poll. All right, so for the 75% of you that said, yes, we do have an onboarding program, tell me a little bit about how you would rate your current onboarding process. Is it very effective, effective, somewhat effective, not effective at all? I love it. I get a sneak peek of all of the answers before I share the screen. So I'm taking a look at all of the answers here. Okay. All right, so let me share the screen here as well and your results. So here are the results. 29% of you say very effective, 43% effective, 29 somewhat effective, and I'm really happy that no one said not effective at all. So for those of you that said effective and somewhat effective, my hope is that you're going to walk away from today's session with some tidbits of how you can take what you've learned today and apply it and strengthen maybe some of those gaps that you're experiencing. For those of you that said very effective, I'd also love to hear from you as to what's working within your onboarding program. So as we go through the presentation today, please feel free to use the chat and or come off of mute as well. And let's engage in a little bit of a conversation around some of these pieces. Perfect. All right, so let's go on to the next screen here. So I wanted to share with you a little bit of what research has told us. I was looking at research just in 2020 that was conducted around this whole space around onboarding, and here are some of the findings. Gallup, which is actually well known for research in the employee engagement space, conducted a survey, and they found that 88% of those that they polled, employees, believed that their organizations don't onboard well. 88%. Right? A huge number. And then 1/3 of companies stated that their onboarding program was informal, inconsistent, and reactive. And I can tell you, experiencing this firsthand, oftentimes with the onboarding process, we're really bogged down with a lot of the paperwork, right? Making sure that the contract is signed and policies are signed and your TD1 forms are signed. There's a lot of incoming paperwork. And because of that, we often feel like we can't catch our breath. And so developing an onboarding program that has structure behind it and is organized in such a way where it's proactive is the way to go. And those are the best practices that I'll share with you in just a moment. Now, many of us and with clients today that I work with, oftentimes I hear, listen, onboarding was difficult enough when we were doing this face-to-face, and now it's become even more difficult as we've stepped into this kind of virtual space that we all find ourselves in. And this was a research that was done by Glassdoor back in 2020. I would anticipate that the numbers are even higher today. But what this shows you is all of the different industries who are now offering a work from home benefit. And so many of your industries are listed up here on the screen. And so we know that many organizations are either having their employees continue to work in-house or in the office. Some are working from home and some are doing a little bit of both. And so sometimes your new hires will need to get used to operating in both kind of arenas, whether it's face-to-face or virtual. And so it's become an even more complex, I would say, HR practice of making sure that our onboarding programs are structured in a way where it can meet the needs of both our virtual space and in person. So these are really interesting numbers. I'd love to see what the research looks like today. In terms of these percentages, I would anticipate that they'd be much higher today. Now, I don't know about you, but I want all of my new hires to feel like this, right? Really excited about the first day, their first week, and their onboarding experience. And this statistic right here, I think, is incredibly important. A great employee onboarding program can improve our employee retention by 82%. And this is something that, I think we need to focus on in terms of why is it so important to get it right? It's important because all of that time that you've spent in recruiting that new hire, finding top talent, training them, developing them, all of those aspects of the time that's involved and the money that's involved in doing that will essentially go down the drain if we don't have a proper onboarding program where they feel like they've been onboarded effectively and that they are now a productive member of your team. And so oftentimes I kind of go right down to the numbers with clients and I say, listen, like, do you have stats on turnover rates? Are you finding that there's more turnover with some of your new hires? If that's the case, let's look at what those gaps are and how we can fix them moving forward. And so, the onboarding program allows your new hires to be more productive. It allows them to be productive faster. It allows them to feel like they belong to the team at a much faster rate as well. And just become a more productive and engaged member of your team. And that's ultimately what we all want as we hire new employees into our organizations. So interesting number there and a high number there too. So we understand why it's so important. And now let's delve into what are the different stages of the onboarding program. Again, most organizations that I've worked with and clients and research has found that most organizations only focus on week 1 of onboarding. For a lot of the clients that I've worked with and companies that I've worked with, it's typically day 1. So we don't even expand past that day 1. And really the stages of onboarding expand this, and I would break it down into 4 main stages. The first stage is pre-first day. And what I mean by that is before they even step foot into the office, into their new roles, before that start date even happens, there's a lot of work that needs to take place behind the scenes. And so I'll walk you through what pre-first day looks like. Of course, there's their first day, and then I break it down into the first month. And sometimes, depending on the role, it may even be the first entire year of onboarding. And typically we find that onboarding needs to extend within that first year because of roles that may be more technical or roles that are more of an executive type position where their scope is a lot bigger. And so it would take them a longer time to maybe get used to processes and practices, etc. So it could be onboarding up to a first year. And so really interesting here, right? I mean, we're talking about more than first day. It's 4 full complete stages of onboarding. And it sounds daunting, but once you get the structure down, then, it becomes a lot easier as you go through it. But it's just building that structure first. That'll be the heavy lifting. Okay. So what are some of the best practices? And the way I've divided up this section is I'm going to walk you through every single stage with some of the examples. And again, you'll get this PowerPoint deck right after our webinar today. So the first one is pre-first day. And I find that this is oftentimes a lot of the heavy lifting that takes place before the new hire starts. And I would include all of these 5 buckets. The first one is sending out a welcome email. I'll walk you through that in just a moment. Sending out a biography or an introduction of the new hire to the rest of the team. Setting up their workstation is really important. Setting them up with potentially a buddy or a mentor or a go-to person within the company goes a long way. And also drafting a training schedule or a structured schedule of some kind for their first week, maybe first couple of weeks of what they can expect is also really important, and really builds a solid onboarding program. So let's talk about that welcome email. Typically, when I draft a welcome email, I include these 3 different sections in there. And I'll show you an example of it in just a moment. So the first one is what to bring. And here we're talking about all of the documentation. You know, that paper trail we were just talking about, how much paper is just incoming when it comes to a new hire. Making sure that they understand that they need to bring that on their first day is really important. Better yet, and in a more compliant way, is to make sure that you have their contract and policy sign-offs actually before they even start, is really important. However, in the body of the email, I'll typically write down here all of the other missing items or pieces that you'll need to bring in on your first day. Please have these signed and ready to go. I then break it down into what to expect. You know, I think we can all reflect back on our first days and whichever jobs we had. There's anxiety there, there's nerves. And so really walking them through what they can expect, what that schedule looks like on the first day, I think goes a long way. So provide them with details on who to go to, who to ask for when they arrive, and even the agenda of what to expect on the first day. And lastly, the third piece is where to go. And, you know, this could be even directions to the office. It could be where to park. And now with COVID-19, a lot of our buildings also have these kind of no parking zones or certain entrance ways. So keeping that in mind as well is really important. You know, maybe wearing a mask to come into the office. So making sure that our new hires are fully equipped and understand what they need to do, what they need to bring, what to expect on the first day. Again, it goes a long way for these new hires. And so let me show you an example of an email template that I created for a client. And this is also something that I created as an HR manager within my team. And so let me pull this up for you so you can take a look. Okay, so you should be able to see it on the screen right now. So the beauty behind this is if you have multiple stakeholders who are involved in your new hire process, it's great to have a template in place that everyone has the same template in Outlook, and it's aligned, it's branded to your company as well. And basically you're giving all of your new hires the same experience and the same messaging. And so that's the beauty behind having a template like this. And so typically what I've done here is anything that's in yellow is what the person would replace with and tailor to the needs of each of these new hires. It's a welcome email that goes out to them. I've broken it down here. This client had 4 different offices. So here's where to go, which office. Here's how you check in. So when you arrive, check in with reception, ask to see HR, what to bring. So here we've included a new hire checklist, which I'll go through with you in just a moment. Here's how to access some of their forms. So please bring these with you along with your ID and your social insurance. And what to expect on your first day. So again, it's really clean looking, but it gives them a clearer picture of what day one is going to look like for them within this organization and within their new role. So that is what the welcome email looks like. I'm going to take a pause for just a second and ask if anyone has any questions before I move on to the biography piece for the pre-first day. I'm just looking at the chat over here on this screen. Okay. All right, so hopefully that was helpful. So I think creating a template for your team is very important. Perfect, so we'll go back here. Perfect, so that is the welcome email that goes out to the hire. And typically, actually, I wanted to mention, I send that email out to the hire 1 to 2 weeks before their start date. That's ample enough time to give them a heads up on what day one is going to look like. So then we move on to a biography. And this is actually a sample of my introduction to the team when I was hired at TELUS. It was back in 2015. I was hired as their learning specialist at TELUS. And before I even stepped foot into TELUS, at the boot there on Boundary and Kingsway, my manager had asked me, hey, Sophia, can you just write up a bit of a bio? Here's the structure for it. We'd like to introduce you to the team before you even step in. And that was the first time I'd ever been asked actually to complete a bio as I was a new hire. So I completed the bio, and what was so impactful with all of this was, and I experienced it firsthand, I walked into my first day at TELUS, and what it did was this bio opened the doors for me to be able to get to know my team members much, much faster. I had team members who recognized my face because of this email, so they were able to match a face to the name. They welcomed me with open arms, and we engaged in conversation right off the bat. I had people coming up to me saying, "Oh my gosh, I heard that you went to Kenya. What was that like? That's always been on my bucket list." Or, "Oh, I heard you love tennis. I love tennis too. Where do you typically play?" Like, all of this became a conversation piece. And at the end of the day, the thing that's sometimes most difficult for new hires is to feel like they belong. And new hires want to belong to a team faster, right off the bat. And this really helps with that because it engages others in that dialogue and welcomes you to the team at a much faster rate. So I would encourage you to do something like this. It doesn't have to be as robust as this. It could be simply a photo saying, here's the person's name, here's their title, and here's when they're going to start. Please welcome them to the team. So this is always a fun way to be able to introduce people to your teams as they jump on board. The next piece is the workstation. So this is incredibly important, and one that I find companies struggle with a little bit, right? You've got a new hire, and how many of you have experienced this, where you've just started a new role and you walk in and nothing is set up, right? I can tell you from past experience, I was hired. I walked into this company so excited to be able to work in this new role, meet the team, and really dive in. And I had nowhere to sit. I didn't have any of my equipment set up for a good solid week. I was kind of just a floater in the office. And, it doesn't leave a really good impression or taste when you realize that the company really wasn't ready for you for your first day. And so making sure that their workstation or their desk or wherever they're going to be working is set up, again, leaves a really good first impression. And that could be printing any of these things out, right? It could be a welcome card that you print out. It could be their training agenda or what their first day may look like. If they have a workstation, it could be a nameplate or like kind of an ID, maybe even business cards on their desk right off the bat. Having a phone list, who to call, like who's who in the zoo is what I like to call it. Giving them a floor plan. So if you have multiple floors within your building or multiple people working within your office, great way to do that so they can match faces to the names. Making sure that all of their equipment is ready to go and their supplies as well. So again, just kind of using this as a checklist item for you or for anyone else who's involved in the onboarding process is another important piece of before they even step foot into the door, having it all set up and ready to go. When I was working in the accounting world, we got pretty fancy with all of these things. We would actually have swag items at everyone's desks because we used to hire multiple new hires at the same time. So every January, every September, we would hire multiple new hires. And at their desk, we would have a coffee mug branded for the firm. We would have a pen, a notepad, a welcome card, all of those nice pieces. And it was just a lovely touch, and it went a long way with the new hires. And the next piece for pre-hire is maybe working within your team to set up a buddy or a mentor or a go-to person for your new hire. 87% of organizations say that having a buddy program boosts new hire proficiency. And that's what we all want. We want our new hires to just run with it, right? We want them to adapt really quickly and dive right into their new role. And in order for them to do that, they need to have the support. And having a buddy or mentor in place is one way in which we can do that. And so I would suggest that, you pick and choose who these people are within your companies. It could be at a peer level. And it's a really great way to empower your current employees actually to get involved in the onboarding process. I can tell you at TELUS, they paired me up with a peer, and I went to this person constantly like, oh, I've got a question about this, or I don't know how to use SharePoint, or where can I find this in the certain drive. You know, it is incredibly important to be able to give them an outlet or a resource to be able to ask their questions, because we know as new hires, there's lots of questions that they're probably going to ask within those first couple of weeks. Nate's mentioned here as well that potentially having an ergonomist there as well to do an assessment of maybe your workstation to make sure that that's all set up before the new hire walks in, I think is a great way to go too. That's a really good suggestion. Thank you. Perfect. Excellent. And the last piece of the pre-first day is getting a training schedule put together. And, you know, there are lots of templates you can use in Word, Excel, where they have sort of the calendar, and then you can pick and choose which training elements you wanted to do per day. So, I mean, you can make it as structured as you like, but having a training schedule in place keeps the team organized as well. And it allows you to bring other stakeholders into the training. So, you know, I think one of the beauties around having a structured onboarding program is that the new hire really needs to understand not just who their team is, but everyone else as well, because it helps them connect the dots. And so what I would encourage you to do is, as you build this training plan, get other employees involved in building this with you, right? And have them as some of the speakers, or maybe job shadowing opportunities for the new hire to be able to sit with and be able to understand their role, the company, the culture, etc. Here's an example on the right-hand side of the screen here of an agenda that I put together back in the day in accounting, where we used to have, again, multiple people arrive on the same day. And so this was day one. Everyone had this agenda on their desk. We would go through kind of the HR pieces in the morning. Then we'd bring a partner in who would talk more about the company, the mission, vision, values. And then we would go through a lot of the processes. We would have a peer lunch, etc. So this was just a great way to keep the new hire on track and give them a clear vision of what's ahead. And, you know, one thing that I've done with onboarding, and I've encouraged my HR teams to do and my clients to do, is, you know, I think it's a great way to be able to create a training plan for each of your different types of roles, right? So if you've got, let's just say, technical roles versus maybe administrative roles, have some sort of a skeleton or a plan in place, and that is your template. And then you can continue to build off of that. So, you know, I would encourage you to draft up a training schedule for each of your different roles and tie in a lot of the job descriptions and job responsibilities into that training plan as well. So we set them up for success. Perfect. So any questions on this element of, before they even walk into the door, what we need to do pre-first day? I'll pause there for a moment. If you have any questions, please go ahead and go off of mute, or you can go ahead and type something in the chat feature as well.
One of the things that we do at Avasar is we actually have a team member sit down at the new hire's workstation and log into their computer and make sure that all of the programs that they are going to be using in their first few weeks with Avasar actually work. It's great that IT comes in and sets up all of their programs, but half the time they miss a shortcut or a license or something like that. So we actually have somebody sit down at their workstation and work through it to make sure that it's all set up properly.
That's amazing. And Tanya, can I just ask, do you do that before the new hire starts, or do you do that with the new hire?
No, it's done before they arrive. All of their setup is complete before they walk in the door.
Excellent. Perfect. That's a great tip. Great tip. I've included an element of what you've just said, Tanya, into the first day itself. But I think that's even better, actually, to have someone look at all of the equipment, make sure the laptop, the login, the passwords, all the programs, accessibility to folders also, right? That's often a missing piece. Having that all set up beforehand is is the way to go. So we know that they're all set up. That's great. Great tip. Thank you. Thank you so much. There's a question here as well about what about performance reviews. So yes, we will talk about performance reviews in just a moment. So that typically happens once the new hire has started in their role. And so I'll talk to you a little bit about what that performance review could look like. I'll give you a sample of that in just a moment. And another question here is, how do you balance employee health with building relationships? So good question, Heidi. You know, I think what we tend to find is as we work in this virtual space, we start to lose connectivity with people and that opportunity to build those stronger relationships. And so as we go through some of this training, I'll give you some tips on how you can build those relationships, even in the virtual setting. So it's like I planted the two of you here with those questions. So thank you for the questions. We'll get right into it in just a moment. Perfect. All right, so that sounds like a lot to do before the first day. But again, you know, once you build structure around it and a bit of a checklist around it, it becomes second nature. And so I'll walk you through a checklist in just a moment as well to keep you on track. So now let's talk about that first day. So you've hired top talent. This new hire is now joining your companies. Their first day has arrived. And typically these are the different elements that I would include in their first day. The first piece is introductions. So what I mean by that is I would take this new hire and I would literally walk them around the office, introducing them to everybody. Now, they're probably not going to remember everyone's names, but at least I've given them an opportunity to kind of start to match faces to the names and to allow other people to be introduced to this new hire as well. So Heidi, for this question here, in terms of the virtual space, the introductions can absolutely be done in a virtual setting. So oftentimes what I find is companies actually already have a weekly team meeting in place. So that could be your introduction of the new hire to the rest of the team. It could be asking this new hire or your team members to set up some one-on-one virtual time with the new hire, maybe a 15-minute virtual coffee with your new hire as well. So these are some elements that we can get a little bit creative with to make sure that those introductions and building those relationships continue to happen. Next is the office tour. So again, walking around the office and showing them who's who and where to go for certain things. An office tour in a virtual space can really look like you know, you walking them through potentially different programs that you use or systems that you use or where to go to find certain things. So a tour can look very different in the virtual space. The first day, I'll always give them their training and onboarding schedule as well, again, to keep them on track so they know what's ahead. Provide them with a welcome lunch. Now, again, with COVID-19, a welcome lunch and a welcome coffee may not be possible. So we've kind of transferred this over into, let's instead have a team meeting, a virtual team meeting, right? And that's going to be our welcome for this new team member. And this is where I oftentimes will prep the new hire and say, I'm going to be introducing you to the team this Friday. We typically have a team meeting every Friday. So, you know, I'll introduce you. And if you could just say a couple of words to introduce yourself, that would be great. So that's typically what I've done in the virtual setting. When I worked at TELUS, you know, that was my first introduction actually as a virtual team member and running a virtual team. And it was a huge learning curve for me because prior to that, I'd always worked in a company that was face-to-face. And I learned a lot of tips and tricks in this virtual space. And the welcome lunch was just that. It was, Sophia, we're going to have this team meeting and we're going to introduce you. You'll introduce yourself to the team. And then after that, our team members are going to be sending you some 15-minute meet and greets. So look out for those in your calendar. And it's a great way for you to chat with every single member of our team to get to know them over the next few weeks. So really creative way of doing it. And it was fantastic to be able to meet all of the team members virtually. On the first day, I'll also go through all of the paperwork, the policies, the procedures, all of those sign-offs that they need to do. I review all of that with them. Go over the equipment and tools, make sure that they have the login information, make sure that they understand how to use the different items and equipment. Next, I go through the organization, the culture, the structure, and FAQs, frequently asked questions. And so a really neat piece here with the organization, culture, and structure. I've encouraged clients, and in my previous roles as an HR manager, I've actually had our executive team, our president, record a quick video. And typically it's like a 2-minute, 5-minute video where they're discussing, here's who we are as a company, here's our mission, our vision, our core values, welcome to the team. And this video becomes a part of that onboarding process where, again, you have aligned messaging across the board. And it's just a really nice, creative, visual way for that new hire to better understand who they're working for. And so I'd encourage you to get sort of creative with that piece as well of potentially doing a video. And on the first day as well, I go through something that I've termed, FAQs. And so what lands up happening is as you start to onboard more and more new hires, you start to also understand the frequently asked questions that come in. And so what I started to do was compile all of these FAQs and created a document. And this became a document that was a part of the onboarding process as well. I'd say, here you are, you're a new hire. These are some questions that we typically get in for new hires. Take a look. And if there are any additional questions that you'd like to add to this, please let me know and we'd be happy to add them in so that our next new hire is also set up for success. So those FAQs were very, very well received. And we also created something called an acronyms list. And I know with many of you in your industries, you probably have lots of acronyms that you use, right? That we understand what those acronyms are, but maybe a new hire wouldn't. And again, at TELUS, I was given this acronyms list that was pages and pages long, but I can tell you it was incredibly helpful for me as a new hire to look through that as I heard these acronyms in meetings. So that could be another useful tool for you as well. And on the first day, I give the new hire some time to settle in as well. So remember, it's kind of overwhelming for them. And so give them some time to just collect their thoughts, get their workstation kind of ready to go, let them review paperwork, and so forth. So give them that kind of time to be able to catch their breath a little bit during their first day. There's a comment here as well. At the new employees' first team meeting, we ask each staff member to share one piece of advice with the new hire that'll help set them up for success in their role. I love that. I love that. So this is where we start to include our existing team members in the onboarding process. I think we want to make sure that everyone feels like they're a part of the success of our organizations. And there's no better way of doing that than including them in the onboarding. So I think that's a great idea. Perfect. So lots there on the first day. And so far we've talked about now what we do before they walk in, what we do on the first day itself. And one of the things I find is that to keep us on track, I would strongly suggest introducing something like a new hire checklist. And I divide the new hire checklist into two. So let me show you the first one here. This is an example of what I've done for a client. This new hire checklist was a checklist for the new hire themselves. And I would give this to the new hire and I would say, okay, so here's your checklist. This is just to keep you on track during your onboarding process to make sure that all of the different items week by week are tackled and that you have the support that you need and that, we've completed all the aspects of our onboarding process. So please take a look at this. As you complete each of them, please insert the date and check off the item. And then once that's done, please submit that into HR. And the first time I was ever introduced to this again was during my time at TELUS. And I can tell you for me, it was amazing because I'd be looking at this going, oh yeah, what do I need to do my first week, right? So I start checking these off my list. And if I didn't know, for example, where to find something, I'd immediately go to my buddy, my mentor, my go-to person that I was set up with. So this also gives that new hire ownership of their onboarding process. So there's a little bit of weight lifted off of you and it's onto the new hire as well. And it keeps them on track of what their onboarding experience looks like. So This, I think, is a great addition to your onboarding process, the new hire checklist. And the second piece is creating a checklist for internal purposes. So kind of behind the scenes, all of the different stakeholders that are involved. I created this checklist here to make sure that all the stakeholders who are involved understand what they need to do when a new hire starts, or even before they start. And so this was usually saved in a centralized drive, and all of the stakeholders who are involved have access to this one document, and they're in charge of updating it, checking it off as each of these takes place. And I think it was like 3 pages long because we had HR involved, administration, we had IT involved, we had marketing involved. So there were a lot of different kind of departments involved with this particular kind of new hire onboarding process. But I would encourage you to have some sort of a checklist item so that you know everything that needs to take place. And this way, all of your new hires have the same or similar onboarding process, right? Because they've all experienced the same documents, the same process, same practices. So I'm going to pause there for a quick sec. We've now gone through pre-first day and first day. Any questions on what you see up here on the screen? Any add-ons for what you currently do for your onboarding for each of these elements? Okay, perfect. All right, so that is the new hire checklist. And now let's move on to the first month. Okay, so now your new hire has started. Week 1, 2, 3, etc. are taking place at this point. And you know, a few of you had talked a little bit about that building relationships piece. And so this is where this comes into play, right? I mean, the first day is important, of course, but then as this new hire gets more accustomed to their role, the company, the team members, we need to make sure that they're continuing to build these relationships within that first month. And so here are a couple of ways in which we can do that. The first one is meet and greets. And so again, this is something that you can do in the virtual space. You could either encourage your new hire to take control of that and encourage them to, you know, here are all the team members. Here's a listing of everyone that's on our team. Go ahead and set up 15-minute virtual coffees or virtual lunches or virtual meetings with each of your team members over the next 2 weeks. So you could do it that way, or you can put the onus on your existing team members to do the same. So meet and greets are fantastic. It's a great way for each of your team members to really emphasize what their roles are, what the company is like, where to find specific things. And it's a great outlet for the new hire to ask their questions as well. So meet and greets are fantastic. Another one is job shadowing. And my first introduction to telecommunications was, again, a very steep learning curve because I'd never worked in that industry before. So because of that, there was a lot to learn. And one of the pieces that they did was, as a new hire, you're required to job shadow in different departments. So for me, I worked as a senior learning specialist where I designed and delivered training. But what they had me do was I actually tagged along with a field service technician, and I would, for a full day, I was with them and I would go into different houses and see how they set up, you know, all of the TVs and the wireless connections, etc. And another opportunity that I had was to sit in the call center and really listen in on some of the calls and what the customers had to say and how we dealt with customers. And for me, that was a great opportunity to understand the company as a whole and start connecting the dots with, where does my role fit into this? And where does their role fit into this as well? So job shadowing, have them sit with different team members in different departments, different practice areas, different business units to understand the company as a whole. Again, a great way to empower your team members too. The first month, your training is most likely going to continue into the first month. as well. So having that training plan in place is important. At this point, you're probably going to start to retweak some of the training as well. You may find that you haven't been able to touch on all of the training, or maybe there's specific training that you forgot to add in. So that document that you have for the schedule, I think would be a living and breathing kind of document that you'd continue to update as you go along. And one of the questions we had in the chat was regarding feedback. So here's where the feedback comes into play. You know, oftentimes when I work with the clients, one of the questions I have is, have you provided your new hire with any type of feedback within their onboarding process? And oftentimes I hear, well, I think so, like informally, we let them know, or we just let them know at the 90-day probationary period, because most of us have sort of probationary periods of the 3 months. And what I would encourage you to do is to actually have a performance review at the 30-day, 60-day, and 90-day check-in. And embed this within your checklist. So this is something that the new hire can expect. And this is essentially 3 touch points now where you can meet with the new hire to do 2 things. The first one is to provide them with feedback on how their performance is, and maybe your take on what training can look like over the next 30 days. But the second piece around it is you're also soliciting feedback from that new hire, right? So you're asking that new hire, how is your onboarding process so far? What else can I support you with? Or what can the team do to support you over the next 30 days? What are some specific challenges that you're facing currently that we can help you with? So asking them those questions allows you to better understand where they're at within this onboarding process, and quite frankly, how you can improve your onboarding process for the next new hire as well. So give feedback, but solicit the feedback as well. So 30, 60, 90-day performance reviews, I would say, is the way to go for a really strong onboarding process. And what I wanted to show you on the screen here was actually a sample of what you could do. This is a sample that I put together for a nursery. And what I did was I worked with them on sort of a rating scale to have within their 30, 60, 90-day period. I would encourage you to have a scale that's like 3 points or below. I've seen some companies that have, you know, a 7-point scale, if not more, and it becomes really convoluted. In my opinion, if you have a new hire, they're either meeting expectations or they need improvement. Like it's one or the other, right? So that's why this looks the way it does. It has just 2 points in that scale. And then I've divided it up into the different components around their job description or expectations in this role. So they need to have job knowledge, quality of work needs to be there, time management, communication, etc. Defined it, have they met it, and then any additional comments. So again, you could do this at the 30, 60, and 90-day mark, and you could have a comments section below as well, where you can add in your commentary and any commentary that the new hire has too. So, you know, your probationary period forms don't have to be complex. They don't have to be multiple pages. It could literally be a 1-page document. Any questions on what you see up here with the probationary period form or the performance reviews? Because I know you had a question about the performance reviews. Yeah, so one of the questions here is, you know, how long typically is this probationary period meeting that you would have at 30, 60, 90 day? I typically set it up for a half an hour for each of those meetings, but I can tell you that typically they go a lot faster than the half hour because you have those regular touch points. It's just a much faster, more productive, more efficient meeting, right? And I typically go in asking the questions, how has your last 30 days been? What are some of the challenges that you're facing? And what support do you need from me? Those are typically the 3 questions I go in with. And those are the 3 questions that fill that space and give you that opportunity to really assess where your new hire is at. Another question here too is why not have exceeding expectations? You could absolutely have exceeding. When I'd mentioned having a 2 or 3 point scale, the 3 point would have been exceeding expectations. So for some of my clients, I absolutely include exceeds expectations, meets expectations, or needs improvement. So having that 3-point scale is a good way to go. Perfect. Okay. Excellent. So those are some of the questions that we've received so far. So I would encourage you to have maybe 2-3 questions that you can lead and guide the new hire with being able to answer some of those questions during this probationary period. So it's not going to be you kind of doing all of the talking. You're really trying to solicit that feedback also from that new hire. Perfect. Okay. And now let's move on to that first year. So, you know, honestly, regardless of whether or not this position is sort of a managerial type role versus a frontline staff, making sure that we have all of these 3 aspects built into their first year of onboarding is important. So making sure we have ongoing feedback is key. Making sure we check in on their goals is important. And making sure that we allot some time to be able to review their job description is also an important piece. And, you know, when I talk about ongoing feedback, I'm not talking about an annual review here. I know many of our firms and companies probably have an annual review process of some kind. What I mean by ongoing feedback is either informal or formal conversations that regularly take place. And this is where we can continue to give feedback to our new hires and our team members on how are things going, what were your strengths, or what were some of the wins over the last, you know, quarter, what were some of the challenges over the last quarter, what support do you need from me, how are your goals going, and how can I support you with those goals? Like that essentially is the structure of what this ongoing feedback can look like. And so providing ongoing feedback is important because really what it's doing is it's setting up your new hire for success, but also you're investing the time to make sure that you're developing their skills, developing their careers, and you're invested in your people, right? So ongoing feedback and checking in on their goals. When I talk about job descriptions, oftentimes I find that companies may have a job description in place, but it's typically collecting dust, right? Like it's an older job description that probably isn't up to date. And what you had up there on the job posting when you hired this new employee may look very different a year from now. Their role may have morphed into something different. And as companies evolve, as companies grow, roles probably grow as well. And the scope of your roles probably look different. And so what I would encourage you to do is a year after you hire an employee, I would set up some time to sit with them and say, listen, you've been here for a year now, congratulations. I do want to talk to you a little bit about your onboarding process. I want to get your feedback on what that looked like. What were some of the strengths? What are some things that we can improve on? And let's also take this opportunity to look at your job description and let's make sure it's up to date. Has your role changed significantly over this last year? And if so, what additions or omissions would you make to this job description? And that way you always have job descriptions that are up to date and a true reflection of what the jobs actually are. So that typically is what I would do in the first year. And to solicit some of that feedback for onboarding, you could absolutely do it in a survey format. You could do it virtually, you could do it one-on-one, you could do it, maybe roll it into an annual review meeting. Whatever the case may be, or the communication method, I think it's important to continue that conversation with that new hire. Perfect. Any questions on this piece around the first year? Okay. All right, perfect. So, love this quote, Maya Angelou, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And the reason onboarding is so important is because we want our new hires to feel like they belong, and we want them to feel like they belong right off the bat. That's their first impression of us as an organization. That's your brand. That is your bottom line because of retention. And at the end of the day, we want our employees to feel like they're a part of something great. And starting it off right at that onboarding process is going to pay dividends for you moving down the road in terms of their employee life cycle. So making them feel special is very important in the onboarding process. Now we have some time for a Q&A. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I'd be happy to answer them. What I will be doing at the end of today's webinar is I'll send you again some of the PowerPoint slides. And there's also, I just wanted to pull this up here on the screen. Actually, it's okay. There's also some links I'll send you on the Upskill Consulting website. There's a blog section, and there are 3 particular blogs around this topic of onboarding with some additional tips. So I will send that to you in the email as well, so you have that at your fingertips. So please go ahead and take a look at that. And any questions? All right, perfect. So I want to thank you all for being here today and carving out an hour of your time to spend it with me. It's been a real honor to be here to walk you through this important topic of onboarding. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And wishing you all the best with your onboarding process and for the remainder of the year. It's hard to believe we're in October. So good luck to you all and wishing you all the best. Thank you all for being here.